right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Fort Vancouver Regional Library's Words and Pictures. This is our fifth event, the second we've held virtually. Thank you all for joining us on Zoom. My name is Jamie. I am the experiential learning librarian for the library district, and I will be hosting. So if you have any technical issues, please let me know. Your moderator today is Christy Peterson, and our speaker is Kelly Garrett. So I'm going to turn it over to Christy.
Hi, everybody. I'm really glad you're here this morning and that everybody is awake. And I am super excited that Kelly is going to be speaking with us this morning. She is the author of, Kelly, I'm not even sure. I know there are 2 books, but there might be more. And her Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I actually mentioned that on a slide, but I've written.
Okay, good. So I will let her share that. But just so you know, her most recent is Fresh Brewed Murder, under the pen name of Emmeline Duncan, and that I will link to the bookstore again, so you can order that book through Vintage Books. And I'm going to turn it over to Kelly. Thanks, Kelly.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out on a Sunday morning. And one second, as I get my slides to move forward. Okay, a few notes as I get going. I'll be talking a lot about part of this, what publishing houses do, and be aware that everyone's experience will be different in publishing, and it can even be different within the same publishing house and even between books with the same publisher. So a lot of what I'm saying is a guide. Don't take it as like an absolute. And keep in mind too that when you start doing publishing, when you're do marketing to publisher, that they'll have publishers of every size have different budgets and different priorities. And it's something that as a writer, we don't really get much of a glimpse of. And that there's a lot of marketing that we can do individually, but it takes, our time and resources. So always finding balance is a key. A few notes about me. As Christy said, I'm the author of Fresh Brewed Murder, which is the first in my Ground Rules mystery series. The second book in the series comes out next year. I was an Oregon Book Awards finalist for my YA debut, The Last to Die. I was a 2020 Oregon Literary Fellow. And I have a little bit of experience working in academic book distribution. But I'm not really an expert in anything, which is one reason why when I did this presentation, I did a lot of research. Meaning that I talked with people in marketing departments of publishers to make sure that what I'm telling you is accurate and that I wasn't missing something obvious. And I'm not a slow talker. If I get going too fast, tell Christy in chat, and I've already given her permission to tell me that I'm acting like a Gilmore Girl. Okay, publishers and marketing. One thing this is what I'm calling the visible marketing by publishers, and this is the kind of the building blocks. This is something that departments do that everything else they do is actually built on, and it's the most obvious things to us as writers, even if we miss it. So, cover design, right? That's actually a huge marketing decision. The title of your book, right? Your marketing department will probably weigh in on what to call your book. And that's actually huge. And you want their advice. The back cover copy and, just listing your book on their website. It falls into marketing, and it's, like I said, it's the most basic thing a publisher will do. And this is the fun part. This is when we get into the invisible marketing stuff does. Marketing, this is the things that your marketing department will do that you won't even necessarily know. So for example, they'll send out, ARCs to all the major trade review sources, and they'll post it on a site like NetGalley. When I say trade reviews, I mean publications like Kirkus, Library Journal, School Library Journal. These are publications that people in the industry, librarians, bookstores, will read the reviews and potentially order for their collections or their stock based off. They might include your book, most likely will include your book in the publisher's display at major industry events like the ALA, American Library Association Conference, and Book Expo America. They'll send your ARC out to influencers, and those can be, book bloggers, librarians, and they'll send your book out, to a lot of libraries and a lot of bookstores, and including they'll get your book into the hands of the buyers for the major chains. And they'll make sure your book is in the catalogs that are used by booksellers and librarians, which is actually a really big deal, right? Because that's where they're going to go to order your book and find out. And they'll make sure your book information is in the major databases, for whether that's through wholesalers, Ingram, library distributors like Baker and Taylor, And again, that makes your book very easy for bookstores to find and order. It's a small thing, but it's actually quite huge. The additional marketing stuff your publisher might do, there's no guarantee, is they might pitch your book to media, and that can be local media and that can be national. And they might pitch your book for articles, like to trade publications. For example, I didn't, like, my most recent book was not reviewed by the Library Journal, but I was mentioned prominently in an article about kind of younger, hipper mysteries, cozy mysteries. They might also place ads in those trade publications. So things like, like I said, Kirkus and Library Journal. And again, that's huge because that's where librarians and bookstores are looking to order books and when they are figuring out what they want to acquire. They might kind of coordinate like some big bookstore events for you. So for example, I'm with Kensington and they hold what they call cozy cons, and where they hold them in different parts of the country, and they kind of have like mini one-day festivals of bookstores. They might invite you to do something like in-house events, in-house organized events like that. And hopefully your publisher has like a really great, newsletter, and they'll, include you in that. They might organize a book tour for you. I mean, there's questions on how cost effective they are. And those book tours could be in person, and those could be singular events, or it could be like a full tour. And they also, we'll get more into this on the social media side, but they also might organize social media driven book tours. And they might distribute copies of your book at fan or industry conventions. Like, I don't know if any of you have ever gone to Left Coast Crime or BoucherCon. They're both huge mystery conventions. Everyone that goes to those ends up with a book bag, like when you check in. And I think once I ended up with like 8 books. One book bag had 4. I've been to some smaller events that also had books in the book bag. And those are, free books. And those, they are usually, the publishers donate the book. So, they might get your book into the hands of readers that way. They might throw, like I mentioned, BoucherCon. And I know a lot of my stuff is very mystery focused. That's what I know. But like BoucherCon has these really big parties where attendees can come, and like Kensington will throw a party and hand out books and, and give away things and get people excited about your books, and hoping like give away the first book in a series, and someone's going to hopefully buy, the rest. And I mentioned there's displays at events like American Library Association or Book Expo of America. Your publisher might also give away copies of, at the event, where they might have like a stack, and you might be like, well, why are they handing out, copies of my ARC at like American Library Association? Well, that's a great way for like librarians to get a chance to look at your book. A good friend of mine I know goes to ALA every year, and what her job is doesn't really do much with the acquiring of books for a library, but she always makes a point of grabbing ARCs and gives them to her friends that couldn't make LA, who might be interested, like her friend that does a lot of children's lit. She might grab a couple for her friend that couldn't make it to the conference that year. And so it's a way that your book gets into the hands of people that will make decisions on whether, like I said, to stock the book in their store or acquire it for their library. And social media, and this is obviously one of the most visible things your publisher will do, but it's probably also has one of the almost least effective, which is, I know, a little counterintuitive. One thing your publisher might do is they might provide social media assets for you. And you might be like, social media asset, what is she talking about? If you look to the left, you'll see a tweet from my publisher, and the graphic that's at the bottom of that tweet is something they created for my book when it came out. They sent me 3 kind of similar assets to that. They sent me like a Facebook, header for like my author Facebook page. They sent me stuff so I could easily promote my book, on my social media. And they gave me, they sent me some assets, and they're like, okay, you can use these, but only after it was like, like April, like 4th. And it was the day that those were also going to show up on their social media. And so, hopefully your publisher will promote your book on their social media channels. And as I mentioned earlier, your publisher might send your book on like an Instagram or similar social media tour. And that is when they'll basically, and some of these are actually paid, well, they'll link up with a bunch of book bloggers. Like for me, last April, my book was reviewed or like posted about by 2 book bloggers a day, every day during April. And so that was all prearranged ahead of time. Everyone got a free copy of the book. And I say paid, they got a free copy, they weren't like paid money to do it. But it was really fun, because it was a marketing effort that showed my book in a lot of different situations. Like people did some really beautiful photos of my book with cups of coffee and stuff like that. And so, yeah, and that is something, because the service that arranges like who does like each day is like paid a small amount. And so that's why that's considered like a paid promotion. Okay. And I was talking to Alyssa Ackerman. She's the communications manager for Kensington Books. And I asked her, like, what did she wish that authors knew about in-house publicity and marketing? And her comment was, she really wishes authors knew how important it is to let your publicist at the publisher know about any events that they book on their own, whether it's a library event, an event they were invited to by another author, etc. Your publicist sends that information along to the publisher's sales team, which means it's only helping everyone in the long run. And what I took from this from Larissa was basically communicate. Let your publisher, know that when you're doing an event like this, right? Like I let my publisher, my publicist know, like, hey, I'm going to be speaking, words and pictures. And if you think about it in the long run, or if I mention like, oh, hey, I'm doing a library event in a virtual event in Idaho next month, it's really great if they know, and then they can see if there's like a sales bump. They might be like, okay, this is an author where it's effective to send out into bookstore events. Or if they're like, and so, it kind of helps everyone in the long run to sort of see where my skills are for marketing and promotions, and also helps them figure out, just like, okay, these are the things that we do that are really effective, and this will help us tune marketing for all of the books that we offer. Okay. The big part, obviously, as your writers, is you're on your own level, like what you can do to help find your audience. Here are, I would say, the basics everyone should be aware of and do. One, a website. It sounds really simple, but making sure you have a professional website, and this is something that you can create on your own, or you can hire someone to do. All of these slides, all of these topics have a slide that we'll get into more depth. Consider creating a newsletter, create author accounts on Goodreads and Bookbub, and network, right? And sometimes people think of network as a negative thing, but no, really networking can be a really good thing, right? It's personal connections that you create. And so that can be, with bookstores and fellow writers. And, you're going to want to create your social media, and you're going to want to identify your social media niche. Okay. Your author website. When you decide what you're going to do, you're going to really have to focus on your technical skills, your budget, and what's going to work best for you. Maybe you hire someone to create, a simple but like really nice looking, WordPress, site for you on a custom domain, or maybe, if you want to spend a lot of money, you can do a site with a ton of bells and whistles, but you're going to want to keep in mind, like, how much you want to invest, right? Do you want to invest 500? Do you want to invest 20,000? I'm going to guess most people are going to want to invest a little bit less. But if you have no technical skills, maybe you want to hire a company or a person that will do updates to your website for you. Or if you are comfortable doing using WordPress, like maybe you hire someone that's going to make you a really sharp WordPress site, but that you can update it on your own as you go. And always, 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 and this, it seems kind of a goofy thing to say, include links to where readers can buy your books. Do you know how frustrating it is to go to someone's website and be like, I want to buy their newest book, and you're like, they don't link to it. And always list at least some basic contact information. You probably have links to your social media accounts, and consider having a public email address. And when I say public email address, I mean not your primary address that you use for your own business and for your communicate with your friends, but one you don't mind the world seeing, but something you can check, daily or periodically, and that anyone can email. And you can set up, something free, with Gmail and different services. So it's, it's a low cost way, but it gives people a way to get in contact with you. Because then let's say you have a book comes out and Christy's like, I want to invite you to this festival that I organize. Well, it's a way for her to be able to reach you. And you can also list your agent and publicist information. You'll see that a lot of published writers will mention that. They're like, oh, if you want to talk to for subrights, contact my agent, this agency. Or you might list your publicist at the publisher you're with. You can also consider, and these are great ways for readers, great ways to connect with readers, include an event calendar that lists, everywhere that you're going to be speaking or presenting. You can have a blog or a news section. I personally call the blog part of my website news, because I'm not going to blog often. It doesn't really fit in what's effective for me. But I love being able to share news, right? And so it's a really easy way to offer news on my site. A newsletter sign up. We'll talk more about newsletters in a minute, but have that prominent on your website. And consider a media kit. Include a bio photo, print and digital. Consider having several bios, like short, something that's like 25 words, something that's like, 100 words, something that's like 500 words. And that way, if someone is going to like review your book or, invite you to like present, and if they go to your site, they can pull quick information about you. And it's a silly thing, but have also copies of your book covers. You want people to like see your site, see the book cover that they just recognized from the bookstore, or be like, oh yeah, I read that and I loved it. Okay. And so I've mentioned a couple of times, consider starting a newsletter. It's actually one of the best marketing tools you can create because it's a way to communicate with people that specifically want to hear from you. And you own that mailing list. You remember last week, Instagram and Facebook went down for a couple of hours, most of the day. Well, let's say Facebook hadn't come back. And let's say that was the main way you were communicating with people, that readers. Well, once it's down, like you've lost all of that contact information. But if people have opted in and they purposely want to read your newsletter, like you always have that connection. And remember too, like social media sites, they change their algorithms all the time. Keeping up with how like Facebook is gonna how to best use Facebook is almost a full-time job in and of itself. So again, once you have the mailing list, it gives you a way to like not have to worry about some of the social media algorithms unless you love doing that. And with the newsletter, you have control over the content. There are a lot of free and low cost options. 2 examples are MailChimp and Constant Contact. A lot of the like services you can use for newsletters also have like some paid options, and those tend to be like really useful, like bells and whistles, but you don't necessarily need them. And then when you decide, like I've heard some people recommend like monthly newsletter, some people suggest quarterly. Just figure out for you like what's going to work best for you and what's going to be what can you commit to doing. Like I do a monthly newsletter. It's smaller, but it's really fun. I enjoy doing it. I have like a drink of the month. I'm talking about what I'm reading. It's low key, but it's a really great way to keep in touch with the readers that want to follow me. And when you create a newsletter, like there are ways that people will get people to sign up. Like they'll offer like a drawing for like an ARC, advanced copy of your book, or maybe you do a giveaway of like a free story. And always have newsletter signups on your website. You want someone that has come to seek out information about you to be like, oh, great. This is a way I continue getting information about this writer that I'm interested in. I mentioned earlier, one thing that you should do is just sign up for Bookbub, and you might have been like, what is Bookbub? Bookbub is simply a book discovery site. Publishers will use it. So Bookbub claims they're a free service that helps millions of readers discover books they'll love while providing publishers and authors with a way to drive sales and find new fans. And so, if you're a reader and you sign up, you might be like, oh, I want to follow Christy Peterson's books. And so you follow, and then anytime Christy comes out with a new book, you get an email saying, guess what? Christy's book is coming out. You should order it. Publishers offer sales and temporary discounts through Bookbubs. And everything I've heard is they can be an incredibly effective way to sell books. And it's free and really simple to claim your books on Bookbub and set up an author profile. And once it's set up, you don't really have to do that much. But again, it's just a really great way to have something that's personal and readers can follow you and your books that are coming out. And I mentioned sign up for Goodreads. And if you've never used Goodreads, it's a huge database of basically every book that's been published. And readers can rate, and you can create an account as a reader, and you can rate and review the books that you've read. It was originally an independent company. It is now owned by Amazon. And as an author, you might be wondering, how do I use Goodreads? Well, you should set up an author profile. I would highly recommend, if you already have an account as a reader, set up a second account that's purely as an author, because you want to approach that a little bit different. Because I personally have 2. I have my reader account. I've reviewed, thousands of books. I rate them. I don't necessarily write reviews. And I don't necessarily want all of that connected with the author profile that I have. So I want to be a little more strategic on that. And so I have like an author account, both for Kelly Garrett and Emmeline Duncan. And on those, you can write periodic blog posts. You might be like, oh, hey, the newest cover of my newest book just came out. Here's a link to it on Goodreads. Or if you have like news or like events, you can, do that. And again, these are things where readers will sign up to follow you. So it's a very easy way to connect with them. And you can allow them to ask you questions. One also tip when you use Goodreads, never respond to reviews that people write about your books. I mean, honestly, generally don't read them. And when you review books from your author account, be very strategic. I mean, if there's a book you hate, you don't necessarily need to review it. I would recommend only like reviewing stuff that you love. Okay, and I mentioned another great thing you can do as a writer is to network with bookstores. And I really recommend connect with your favorite local indie stores. And it's great if you're already a customer, it really helps make that connection go a little easier. And if it's a store close to your home, it makes it much easier to sell signed copies of your books. And you can have that on your website, be like, oh, you want a signed copy of my book? Well, order from Vintage Books and it can be signed and personalized. You can set up pre-order campaigns with your local stores, and that's can be a real win-win for both of you. Because that means on your social media, you can be like, oh, hey, pre-order my book from Vintage Books and you will get, some swag, and it can be personalized. The book will be personalized when it's delivered. And, your local indie store might appreciate giveaway items. I visited Beach Books in Seaside, and they showed me they have a whole drawer of small items that, like, if you buy a copy of a book, like they might be like really cool pins, or some was like small artwork, like, like kind of 8x8, like book covers and things like that. And those are things that were provided by either the publisher or the writer. And those can be huge. Like, because when I visited Beach Books, I had dropped off some hand knit coffee sleeves. Like, you put them on your to-go cups. They put an Instagram post up saying, hey, come in and buy Fresh Brewed Murder and you'll get a free coffee sleeve. And they had someone show up 30 minutes later, afraid that they'd already gotten rid of all the coffee sleeves. And they're like, no, you're good. Here's your sleeve. And it gives a little bit of extra something to be excited about for on the reader side. And it gives also something for, your cool local indie store to post about on social media. A few tips while networking. When I say read the room, if you go in and it's a really busy day and the booksellers are clearly running around and they have huge lines, that's maybe not the best time to chat. You could maybe offer to leave like your card, but maybe come back again later. And always remember, booksellers are people first, and booksellers second. So always be kind, And no matter how tempting it is, don't rearrange displays to showcase your book. I was actually talked to a couple booksellers on Twitter, and that's one of their number one pet peeves is people. I mean, it makes sense. We all want our books to be prominent on the shelves, but if they just spent time arranging a beautiful display, they don't want people to come in and just completely redo it. If your book is in stock in the store, offer to sign, but always ask first. If you do kind of sneak attacks and sign, you can really anger some bookstores, and if they make them angry, they might not want to work with you in the future. And you might get in the way, because books are what's called returnable. You might get in the way of, basically, there's some like financial decisions they're going to make in the future. And when you show up to sign stock, have a business card ready that has your social media handles listed, because that makes it easy for the store to tag you and your new books on their social media feed. For example, I went into the Vancouver Barnes & Noble a few weeks ago, and I signed copies of my book in stock. And it was great because I was able to give them a copy of my business card. And later that day, they tagged me on Twitter and Facebook. And it made it that much easier for them to be like, they don't have to go and try to search and find me. It was like, oh, good. Just it's done. It's great for both of us. And, you can always approach your local, favorite indie about doing a bookstore event. And when you do that, consider checking in with your in-house publicist first. If you're like, hey, I want to throw a launch party. And just, because one, your publicist might be willing to help you do some of the legwork to set it up. Or maybe they have like an idea and you don't want to, you just want to make sure you're communicating. And a general piece of advice I've always heard is be careful about oversaturating one town with events. You want your events to feel special. If there's like 5 bookstores and you do 10 events in a month, you're kind of making your crowd of people kind of disperse. You want to make those events very celebratory. Here is, a bookseller quote, and see if I can read it because, here we go. Independent bookstores are a safe place in any town or city. Book people are some of the absolute kindest and most welcoming. When you come into our store, please chat with us. We love hearing about your favorite books or your own book. But once you mention being a bestseller on Amazon, we lose interest quickly. We desire for authors to recognize the detriment Amazon has done to small businesses and especially independent bookstores. So it's Alexa Beach Books. And so I would take that, like, show your enthusiasm and definitely recognize that for a lot of independent bookstores, they have serious issues with Amazon. And you can argue whether that's good or bad, but just it's always something to keep in mind. Okay. A big question people will ask is like, why should I use social media as an author? And the biggest reason to use social media is purely to make connections. And these connections will be fellow readers, fellow writers, and industry professionals. Social media isn't necessarily going to be your greatest sales tool, but like I said, it is a great way to build your community and get to know people. It's a really general do's and don'ts as you're setting up your social media, as you're using social media, is don't exclusively self-promote. A general guide I've heard is 1 self-promotional post for every 10. And of course, like, on your book launch day, you can kind of ignore that guide because, you're celebrating and you're like, guess what? My book came out. You might post a little bit more. But think about it. If you were following someone on Instagram or Twitter and all they ever did was say, like, buy my book, would you want to follow them? Probably not. Which leads to the next point of be social, right? Like, you see someone, like, they have a cover reveal and it's beautiful, congratulate them, right? Retweet it. Build connections, talk about the books that you love or other things that you love, and always be authentic, right? You're going to kind of craft, and we'll talk about this in the next slide. You'll kind of craft a writer kind of like brand, but be very authentic, be something that feels very true to you. And only use the social media platforms you enjoy. If you hate Twitter, don't go on it, right? It's not going to be an effective use of your time. But if you love Instagram, or you love Pinterest, like, lean into those, right? Do what you're going to do well and what you're going to enjoy doing. Okay, when I said, like, find your niche in social media, you might be asking, what do I mean? Well, as a person and as a writer, like, what are your interests? And what do you enjoy talking about? And look at those 2 things and how do those intersect with your books and what you write about? I have an example to the left of Sonia Thompson. She lives in Vancouver. Her debut novel comes out next spring. She's a huge fan of children's literature. She loves coffee and she absolutely loves cats. And her book is actually, about a girl saving her cat. And so she starts a newsletter that's, talks about kid lives, coffee, and cats. I talked to a couple industry pros about what they wanted to see in authors' social media presence. And Larissa says, I find that authenticity is always the best route to go for an author's social media presence. People love seeing authors sharing parts of their lives on Instagram and Facebook, whether it's photos of a book event, excitement over their latest release, pictures of their pets, books they're reading, or even hobbies they are into. And Lauren says, be genuine. Readers want to see the world as authors do, through photos and words, to feel like they're part of the author's story through conversation. As a reader and a marketer, I want to see into the author's world to know how they experience life, and links to your books. And note when you want to see like a view into the world, the author's life, you don't mean like your entire world, right? You can really curate what you want people to see. And if you aren't on social media, or if you want to build your social media, you might be like, well, how can I get really started on this as an author? Well, as we've talked about, figure out your niche and then post content and, that kind of follows your brand and who you are. I would say as an example, like if you are building a following with vegan baking tips, don't publish a photo of a rare steak, right? Because if you're developing an audience of people that are really into one thing, you don't necessarily want to post something that's going to be completely different. And that doesn't mean that, for example, you can't get political, just be very strategic. One thing I would really recommend is follow authors you admire and look at how they use social media, and then kind of analyze, what do they do that I like, and how can I look at what they're doing and how do I use that myself, right, in your own personal way. And always determine your boundaries and how much of your life you want to share. So for me, I show lots of pictures of my dog. I don't show photos of my family. I talk about what I read, but there are other things that I'm obviously not going to talk about. And as I mentioned before, don't be too sales oriented. Consider asking questions to engage your audience. You will see that a lot on Instagram, where people will be like, oh, it's Halloween. Like, oh, I can't buy Kit Kats because if I buy Kit Kats to give out on, on the 31st, I'm going to eat all of them. What's your favorite candy? It's, silly question, but people will respond. And a general guideline, remember that the quality of your followers is better than quantity. And so if you have 10,000 followers, but only one person likes your posts, it's actually better to only have like 100 followers if 10 or 20 of them interact with you and like what you're doing. Engagement, like I said, will trump pure quantity. And one thing I think that can really help people is to know that you can schedule your posts ahead of time. Some of the platforms offer the ability to schedule posts ahead of time. So Facebook and Twitter both have it integrated into the platform. And there are secondary services you can use, like Buffer and stuff like that. And so you can preemptively, like, oh, my book is coming out. Maybe you do 10 days up to it. You mentioned like, oh, hey, you can do pre-orders here. Oh, hey, there's a sale on my book here. Oh, hey, here's something I created related to the book. And those will, post on it over a period of time. And you don't have to like log on and do it yourself. And a big question that people will ask, like when they're creating content, like, how do I go about that? Well, a really great thing you can do is look at your book and what you write. And are there elements of that you can use for your social media content? So for example, like cozy mysteries tend to have recipes at the back. Well, can you make a cool little card, virtual card with like a recipe, and maybe do a couple posts on like how to bake something? Or if you're writing historical fiction, like, have you visited the site that you're talking about? And did you take photos, and could you post those photos and write like a little bit, about the real life history that you talk about in your novel? Is there something that you love to do? Maybe it's tangential that you could do like how-to tutorials, right? Or just talk about, your love. Like let's say if you write about wine, well, maybe on Fridays you're like, hey everyone, it's happy hour. Do you know about this? And mention some like cool like wine facts. If you write for kids, is there content in your book that teachers could use? And and on a similar vein, is there content in your book that would be useful for book clubs or reading groups? Because if you kind of create contents like for kids, like maybe like worksheets or like coloring, like a color kind of sheets so they can color that connects with your book, a teacher might be able to use that in school, or like a librarian might hand that out after like a story hour type of thing. And always when you're on social media, be yourself and talk about the things that you enjoy. I have a friend that writes about sharks, and then she's working on a book about insects, and she writes really fun posts with like random shark facts, and it's just very unique and creative. And one thing you might ask, like, okay, so you talked about like creating like a card for your like a recipe, or if you want to create like cool social media graphics leading up to your launch date, you have a lot of good options. Programs like Canva and BookBrush allow you to make social media graphics for free or low cost with minimal experience. And these are kind of fun. They include, backgrounds, the ability to integrate text and video. They already have templates that are designed for the different social media platforms, so it's great. It's designed for like Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. And keep in mind, you can use photographs from your own life to show a kind of curated slice. And, you can consider buying props. Like if you like to read, you can buy some cool stuff and make your own little book photos, buy like flowers and coffee cups. And I have some examples coming up. Like the top level are all photos I took with just stuff that I own. Like I have a skull, so it's right here behind me. And that's a great prop to use in like mystery and like crime photos. And I use some examples below of there's both Canva and BookBrush. And BookBrush is kind of fun because it can make your book look 3D. And there's mine, it turns out, they're very monochromatic, but there are some like super colorful options as well. And one thing when you people talk about social media, if you ever get confused about how to do something, like honestly, just Google it. There are so many amazing how-tos out there. And I think sometimes you forget, you might feel overwhelmed and you're like, how do I like integrate this video? Well, ask Google, and someone else has had that same problem. And that is the end of my kind of formal talk. I would love to hear your questions. And these are my social media links, and both as Emmeline Duncan and as Kelly Garrett. Any questions out there? Oh, I would say marketing wise, some of the best things I've done were, oh, go ahead, Christy.
Oh, no, I was just popping in to let everybody know that feel free to pop in the chat with questions, or if you want to ask the question in person, that would be great too. Alyssa just popped in with a question. Can you talk about managing a pen name with social media and marketing?
Oh, that's actually a good question. That's something I've been working on the last year, because I write for teens as Kelly Garrett and for adults as Emmeline. And some people I know, when they have a pen name, they keep it they keep their name secret from each other. And I kind of went the reverse, where, you know, I mention in like all my social media, I'm like Kelly Garrett and I write as Emmeline. And so with those, I think about like what content kind of like works best for both of those. And so with stuff for Emmeline, I mean, I definitely do a lot more related to, you know, cozy mysteries. It's probably, I mean, I post more on Instagram, on Twitter for that account, but I'm like, what kind of fits the people, the readers that read this book, like what are they going to be most interested in? And especially because my main account, I started it before when I was an aspiring writer. I talk about a lot of random things, like I'm a Timbers fan. I don't necessarily talk about that as much on like my Emmeline account, because my Kelly is a little bit more general. You know, and yeah, you basically, you kind of figure out kind of the niche of like of multiple accounts, and like, and how you want to, you know, strategically like talk about your work on both. And I also like will cross kind of talk about it, like if I get a really, like I was on Good Day Oregon, and so I posted about that on both accounts. But again, they're not secrets. And I've definitely known people that they find it really tiring to have more than one account, so they'll combine them, and they'll be like, you know, this is me and these are the names I write under. And so if that's easier for you, you can just do that, you know, have one account. One thing I would really recommend is, and basing this off a friend's experience, it's generally better to use your name versus like, let's say the name of your book or a series. Because like I have a friend, she had a series that did really well, but she writes more than one series. And they can get a little confusing if you're going to like read her series about, I'm going to make this up, let's say you have like a bicycle series and you had like a coffee series. It's really confusing to readers sometimes to look for like that bicycle series if everything is listed under like a coffee series name. But if it's the author name, it makes you much more easy to find. And that is huge. So if you want to ask a follow-up question, I'm more than happy to talk about this more.
Can I ask you, I'm Donna Anderson. Hi, thank you for giving your time to us. How much time do you find that you have to spend on your social media accounts per day, per week, per month?
Well, the good and bad thing about social media is you can turn it into, if you wanted, almost a full-time job. And so personally, what I do is like, I kind of think of like what I really want to prioritize my time. And so, you know, like, because I take photos all the time. And so I will kind of, because I find Instagram fun, I will, you know, kind of log into Instagram daily because I like it, right? And it's like a 5-minute break. But I do know if I find myself like, instead of writing, going to Facebook, I turn it off, right? I'm like, that's not the best use of my time. I would say if I spend less than 15 minutes a day, I would be surprised, but I try not to spend all of my time there. And I definitely, like, if I'm, and like I do social media for an organization, like for writing our organization like that, I'm really strategic, right? And I try to figure out like over a calendar, and I try to only spend, you know, for that, let's say 15 to 30 minutes a week. I look at like what we have coming up on like our blog, I schedule everything, and then I stop and I don't let myself, you know, go back and hover. Then I do check the days where I know stuff is posting and I make sure it's up. So, I mean, if you let yourself, you could easily spend 8 hours a day using social media, and I don't think that's healthy for anyone. I try to make my goal being, I would say 15 minutes a day, and some days I try to check it at all. And again, it really depends. Like if I have a book coming out, I know I'm going to spend more time because I'm going to also be more responsive and more aware of what's going on. So when I knew like they were like more likely people are going to like tweet about my book, I want to check Twitter more often, like that, say the week before publication date and like 2 weeks after, just to like retweet stuff or, you know, to repost stuff on Instagram. But
so
and then there might be people that use it more. Oh, good.
So what you're saying is that you spend 15 minutes a day on each account that you have? Or
total. Total.
Total. Okay. Thank you very much.
For sure.
I was going to jump in, Kelly, because I know this is something that probably you and I both dealt with some is, you know, dealing with social media before you're published, like if you're working toward publication, because I know I remember when I first came in to the whole scene, there was a lot of emphasis on, well, you've got to have your platforms and you've got to have your platforms on all the social medias. And I just remember like going home from hearing that talk and spending, you know, like all my time on social media instead of actually writing, because I was so worried that I needed my platform. And realizing later that, yeah, that really wasn't very helpful. So do you have thoughts for people who are working toward publication and how to best use their social media?
I would say, sign up for the social media kind of accounts that you like and start building, I would say kind of start building your community, right? Look for, like local writers, right? Look for like local events. Like if you go to a bookstore event, that's a great thing to like tweet about, but don't be so worried about having like this amazing platform. I've been with 2 different publishers. Neither of them cared what my social media platform was like. They weren't looking for any specific, that's a piece of misinformation I hear of like, oh, no publisher will look for you if you don't have 10,000 followers. That's not true. They didn't care at all. They did look at what I had as far as like, I think, do we want to work with this person? And they're actually, my accounts, my publishers have both been very happy with what I do have. And yeah, I know for nonfiction, and certain types of nonfiction, platform can be more important. And I think a lot of that is also proving that you know what you're talking about, but that's not even the end all and be all. So I would say if you're aspiring, like set up and do what you enjoy, but don't worry that like your platform is going to like make or break your novel deal, right? Because there are even still to this day writers without Twitter, without Instagram accounts. Like I know a very successful writer, he has Twitter and that's it. Right? Like he has never posted an Instagram photo. He's never, doesn't have a Facebook page. His books sell incredibly well. Actually, went to talk yesterday from someone that's been publishing for 26 years. He doesn't even have social media. And he's a New York Times bestseller. He's been translated into like 30 different languages. So it's social media is a great tool. It's not the end all and be all. And again, I said there are a lot of legitimate questions on it, how much social media really even helps you like sell books, right? Huge social media followings doesn't necessarily lead to a lot of book sales. I've actually found I'm more likely, and this is sort of funny, like personally, I'm more likely to buy a book someone recommends that they didn't write, So like if Christy was like all of a sudden talking about like some novel she couldn't put down, I'm really likely to go buy that novel. If the same author was talking about her own book, I'd probably be less likely to buy it. And that's kind of where the community part starts pulling in.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Anything it's fine if it's something that just specifically relates to what you write. It doesn't have to be as broad or general. If you have something more specific, that would be fine.
I would say one thing I'll add, like networking, look for your local like writing organizations too. And those can be, well, I would say local and national. Like I'm a member of like Sisters in Crime and like Mystery Writers of America and SCBWI, which is how I met Christy. And, all of those are groups that have local events. And so that's a great way to start networking also on, offline to build your community of writers, which is this, it's, like I said, people treat networking sometimes like it's bad, but no, those are people that you'll get tips from and you'll get even like emotional support from, right? There's nothing like hanging out with a group of writers and be like, oh, I'm having this problem when a book is coming out, and people will either tell you like tips on how to get through it, or they'll be able to they've been through it and they help you feel grounded. So
I have a question about local writers groups. There's both the Willamette Writers and the Oregon group. Do any of you belong to them?
I'm a member of Willamette Writers. I'm not a member of the Oregon Writers Colony, but I've looked at it because I know some, like all the writers I know that belong are really fantastic. And there's also, I mean, locally, there's also Romance Writers of America has a Portland chapter. If you write for children, there's Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. There's an Oregon chapter. Mystery Writers of America has a regional chapter. Sisters in Crime has a local chapter. I think, well, there's Horror Writers of America. I'm not sure
How do you
how
feel
their
about,
chapters work.
how do you find the writers in the Willamette Writers? Because I've been considering joining them.
Well, join, I would say. They have like so right now they're doing mostly virtual stuff, as you know, most of us are. They have coffee hours where you like log in and they kind of everyone chats. And that would be a great way to start. You're seeing people like online. And you know, you can make a note of like, oh, this writer, you know, or aspiring writer, write something you're interested in, you know, and then maybe you follow up with them. You'd be like on Twitter or Instagram, be like, hey, I saw you, I was really interested. And I would, you know, and watch when they do, you know, they do events and lectures. I know right now it's virtual. They'll get back to in person, you know, eventually, hopefully. And that's a great way because then you're meeting people in person. And I would say like watch like the news section of Willamette Writers. And when you see like events for members, try to go. You know, that way you both support your local bookstores, you support the writers, you know, in your community, and you meet people. And that can be a great way to meet other writers. And it's fun, right? We should all celebrate the books that are coming out.
Thank you. Thank you for your advice there.
So I've posted, I ran over to my internet and I grabbed Willamette Writers and Oregon SCBWI. I'll try to grab a couple more as we go along, but I would definitely like second the whole idea of networking with other writers. I'm a member of SCBWI because I write nonfiction for kids, and I have actually gotten work through just knowing people, you know, being out there, having people that I know, you know, they know what I write, I know what they write. So I've recommended people for stuff that maybe wasn't the right fit for me and vice versa. So it's a little bit different because it's, you know, what I'm talking about is kids nonfiction, but you definitely are going to hear about opportunities and just receive support and just be able to access things that you won't if you're just by yourself, to be part of some kind of a writers group. I know that Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America also has an Oregon chapter. So if you are writing that kind of work, actually Curtis Chen, who's over on the comics track right now doing presentations there, he has been the president of that chapter, the local chapter. I don't know if he is currently, but he definitely is a resource for that. So there are all kinds of groups. Yeah. Okay. I knew he was involved somehow. So just definitely seek out, they can be genre specific or it can be more general like Willamette Writers, but definitely seek out that kind of stuff, because there's nothing better than just sort of being able to pick up other people's brains about, well, what did you do for marketing, and what, you know, what happened, you know, I went to this book, you know, I had a book event and nobody came, or, you know, whatever. Just getting support and ideas from other people is really valuable.
And some of those organizations also offer some really great perks that you wouldn't think of, like SFWA and then Mystery Writers of America and Horror Writers of America all help fund Writers Beware, which is it's a blog and it's a service that tries to that talks about literary scams. And so if you're like, you know, you get a contract, especially if you're like unagented, you're like, I don't know about this, you know, you can actually email Writers Beware and they'll give you information of like feedback that they've heard about the publisher. Like if people have had bad experiences, they'll give you a sense of like, even read the contract, tell you if things are non-standard. And they have whole blog posts about, you know, different of non-standard contracts, whether it's small publishers, contests. They're very on top of bad events happening in the community, you know, and so by supporting and being a member of some of those organizations, you're supporting the work of groups like Writers Beware. And I know, like, as an MWA member, like we get some discounts from like bookstores and stuff like that. There's a lot of random perks that you wouldn't necessarily realize, in addition to local programming and getting a way to meet my like local fellow writers. Any more questions? I love answering questions.
Sorry, if I don't, if I unmute myself, it would be more helpful. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, so Jamie, I'm going to throw back to you then, if everybody's gotten their questions answered.
Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Kelly, so much for speaking today. There's a lot of great content, and I went and followed your Instagram, so that was awesome. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day with words and pictures, and you can review your schedule to find your next session. Thank you so much for being here, and we hope you have a good day. Bye.